Something significant happened inside the Trump administration today, and the gap between how it is being reported and what it actually means for the trajectory of this war has never been wider or more consequential. Joe Kent, the director of the United States National Counterterrorism Center, resigned. He is a retired Green Beret who completed 11 combat deployments across the Middle East. He is a Gold Star husband whose wife, Shannon, was killed by a suicide bomber in Syria in 2019. He is a Trump loyalist who ran for Congress twice as a MAGA Republican. He was nominated to his position by Donald Trump himself. He was confirmed by a Republican Senate in July 2025. And today, in an open letter addressed directly to the President of the United States and posted publicly on social media, he said something that has shaken the justification for this entire war at its foundation. He said Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. He said it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. He said this echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat. And then he said the words that every analyst watching this conflict will be examining for what they reveal about the internal intelligence picture that senior officials actually saw before February 28th. He said this was a lie. And it is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. What is being documented here is developing in real time, and the implications for the American chain of command, for the legal justification of this war, for the markets pricing every signal coming out of Washington, and for every family with a son or daughter deployed in the Middle East right now require the kind of analysis that connects the documented facts rather than simply transmitting the official version. Before going further, it is necessary to establish precisely what is confirmed and what remains in the analytical category of open questions. Because in a political crisis, this volatile, the distance between those two categories, is where misinformation travels fastest. What is confirmed? Joe Kent resigned. The resignation was posted publicly and confirmed by a senior U.S. official to CNN. Kent is the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, which is housed within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and advises both the President and DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard on terrorist threats to the United States. Kent accused Israel of orchestrating a misinformation campaign to push Trump into war. He accused the American media of participating in that campaign. He said he cannot, in good conscience, continue to serve. He referenced his personal loss, his 11 combat deployments, and his Gold Star status as the foundation from which he is making this statement. All of that is documented, confirmed, and in Kent's own words, publicly available. What is contested is the accuracy of his central claim. Trump immediately said Kent was very weak on security and that it was a good thing he resigned. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt issued a lengthy statement calling Kent's claims about Israeli influence on Trump both insulting and laughable. House Speaker Mike Johnson told reporters he got all the briefings, that there was clearly an imminent threat, and that Iran was very close to nuclear enrichment capability. Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Mark Warner, a Democrat, said Kent was right that there was no credible evidence of an imminent threat that would justify rushing the United States into another war of choice in the Middle East. What is documented but requires precise examination is the intelligence picture itself. And that is where this analysis becomes consequential for everyone watching. The director of the National Counterterrorism Center is not a symbolic position. Understand what this role actually does, because most coverage is not explaining it clearly. The NCTC leads the United States government's analytical and operational effort on all terrorist and counter-narcotics threats. The director advises the president directly. The director has access to the full architecture of American intelligence collection, including human intelligence from the CIA, signals intelligence from the NSA, defense intelligence from the DIA, and threat assessments from across the entire intelligence community. When Joe Kent says Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, he is not speaking as a politician with an opinion. He is speaking as the person whose institutional function was to assess exactly that question. His job was to tell the President of the United States what the threat picture actually looked like. And on his way out the door, he said the picture being presented to the public and the picture used to justify this war did not match what the intelligence actually showed. That creates a specific and verifiable question that this analysis will examine systematically. The Trump administration's stated justification for launching Operation Epic Fury on February 28th has shifted multiple times since the war began. In the first days, it was framed as a preemptive strike against Iran's nuclear program before it could be completed. Then it was framed as a response to Iran's imminent plans to attack the United States. Then Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Monday that the imminent threat that triggered the strikes involved Israel's plan to hit the Iranian leadership. Then on Tuesday, Trump told reporters that Israel's plan had nothing to do with his decision and that he believed Iran was planning to strike first. Those are 4 different justifications offered in 18 days by senior officials of the same administration. The legal and constitutional standard for using military force without a congressional declaration of war under the War Powers Act requires imminent threat. If there was no imminent threat, the legal basis for this war becomes the subject of exactly the kind of constitutional challenge that congressional Democrats are already preparing. Senator Warner, the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, specifically validated Kent's claim while distancing himself from the messenger. The deliberate separation of those two assessments by Warner, a senior Intelligence Committee member with access to classified briefings, is analytically significant. Warner is not dismissing the substance of what Kent said. He is agreeing with it. Now let us examine the specific language of Kent's resignation letter because the precise wording contains information that headline summaries are not transmitting accurately. Kent wrote that early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. The phrase wholly undermined your America First platform is directed at Trump's political base with surgical precision. Kent is not making a foreign policy argument in the abstract. He is making an argument inside the ideological framework of the movement that put Trump in power. America First means no more wars in the Middle East. That was the campaign commitment. That was what Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, and a dozen other influential media figures who helped fuel Trump's 2024 victory have been saying publicly since this war began. When Kent says the Israeli lobby undermined that platform, he is activating a political fault line that already exists inside the MAGA coalition. He is not creating a new argument. He is providing official intelligence credentials to an argument that already has significant mass within the movement. And the Trump administration clearly knows this because Axios reported within hours of the resignation that the White House is bracing for an expected Tucker Carlson interview of Kent. 3 sources inside and outside the administration confirmed this to Axios. Carlson has 17 million subscribers on his platform and has been one of the most vocal right-wing critics of both this war and the U.S. relationship with Israel. The administration is not worried about a Tucker Carlson interview the way you worry about something harmless. You brace for something you know is going to hurt. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence under whom Kent served, has kept a conspicuously low profile since the war began. Gabbard was previously one of the most vocal opponents of U.S. military interventions abroad. She was a frequent guest on Tucker Carlson's platform before the war began. She ran for the Democratic presidential nomination on an anti-war platform in 2020. Her silence throughout 18 days of this war has been noted by every analyst watching the internal dynamics of the administration. Her scheduled testimony before the House Intelligence Committee on Tuesday was postponed until Thursday. Whether that postponement is connected to Kent's resignation is one of the open questions this analysis cannot resolve with available evidence. What can be stated analytically is that the two most prominent anti-interventionist figures in the Trump intelligence apparatus, the DNI and the NCTC director, have both been conspicuously absent from the public defense of this war. One is now gone. The other is silent. The questions that absence raises about what those two officials have seen in the classified intelligence picture are questions the Senate Intelligence Committee will be pressing when Gabbard testifies on Thursday. The White House response to Kent's resignation tells its own story through what it chose to emphasize. Leavitt's statement said Trump had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first. She said the evidence was compiled from many sources and factors. She also said the commander-in-chief determines what does and does not constitute a threat because he is constitutionally empowered to do so, and because the American people went to the ballot box and entrusted him and him alone to make such final judgments. That last formulation deserves careful attention. The White House is not defending the intelligence. It is asserting executive prerogative over the definition of threat itself. The president decides what is a threat. That is a legally defensible position. But in the political context of an active war whose domestic support is fracturing, it is also an argument that sidesteps the factual question Kent is raising. If the president decides what constitutes an imminent threat, the question of whether Iran actually posed one becomes irrelevant to the executive branch's authority to act. What it does not become irrelevant to is the public's right to know whether the justification they were given was accurate. And right now, the director of the agency, whose job it was to assess that justification, has said publicly that it was not. The economic dimension of this resignation requires direct attention because it reaches every person watching this analysis, regardless of their proximity to the conflict. Kent's resignation does not halt a single strike. It does not reroute a single tanker. It does not change the price of oil by $1 in the immediate term, but it does something more consequential in the medium term. It creates a validated domestic political opposition to this war within the president's own ideological coalition at the exact moment when the economic pain of the conflict is becoming visceral for American consumers. Gas prices rose another 7 cents today to $3.79 per gallon. That is a 26% increase since February 28th. Gulf oil exports from the 8 major producing countries have fallen between 61% and 71% from February levels, according to Kapler and Vortexa shipping data. The American economy is absorbing that shock in real time, and it is being absorbed disproportionately by the working class and lower middle class voters, who are the core of Trump's political coalition. The person who just resigned said this war serves no benefit to the American people and does not justify the cost of American lives. That message, delivered by a Gold Star husband with 11 combat deployments arriving at exactly the moment when consumers are paying 26% more for gasoline, is not a message that disappears because the White House calls it insulting. It is a message that connects emotionally and personally to the constituency already bearing the heaviest cost of this conflict. There is one more element of this story that deserves analytical attention, and it is the parallel that Kent himself drew explicitly. He compared this war to Iraq 2003. That comparison is not casual. It is precise. In 2003, the United States went to war in Iraq on the basis of intelligence assessments that claimed Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and posed an imminent threat to American security. Those assessments were later determined to be wrong. The war cost 4,500 American lives, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilian deaths, $2 trillion, and the destabilization of an entire region whose consequences are still being managed today. The Chilcot inquiry in the UK and the Senate Intelligence Committee report in the US both documented how the intelligence was shaped to fit a predetermined policy decision rather than the other way around. Kent is specifically invoking that pattern. He is saying the same mechanism that produced Iraq is producing this. He is the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. He had access to every piece of intelligence that was used to build the case for this war. He is saying the case was built backwards. Policy first, intelligence second. And the intelligence that did not fit the policy conclusion was not the intelligence that ended up in the briefings that drove the decision. The broader question that assembles all of these elements into a coherent analytical picture is this: what happens to a war when the internal justification collapses in public while the external military operation continues? The kinetic war does not stop because a counterterrorism director resigns. Iranian missiles are still firing. Israel is still striking Tehran. Larijani was killed overnight. The Basij commander was killed overnight. U.S. gas prices are still rising. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. But the political architecture that sustains public and congressional tolerance for all of that is now under structural pressure from a source that cannot be dismissed as a Democrat, a never-Trumper, or a foreign critic. Joe Kent was Trump's own man. He was confirmed by a Republican Senate. He had 11 combat deployments. He lost his wife to a suicide bomber. And he said in public that this war was manufactured by the Israeli lobby and that the threat justification was a lie. Senate Minority Leader Schumer said today that Trump has no plan for how to end this war and that he created a mess in the Middle East. Senator Murphy accused Trump of being inconsistent in his messaging, saying in the same day that Iranians want to make a deal and then saying all their leaders are dead and he does not know who he is dealing with. The congressional opposition is organizing. The internal resignation is documented. The economic pain is measurable and rising. The media figures who helped elect this president are turning against this war. And the man who ran America's counterterrorism assessment apparatus until this morning said the threat was invented. Before I hand it over to you, 3 questions for tonight. Question A. Joe Kent served 11 combat tours and lost his wife to a suicide bomber in a war in the Middle East. He was Trump's own appointee. He had access to the full classified intelligence picture on Iran. And he said on his way out the door that the threat justification for this war was a lie constructed by the Israeli lobby. Does his institutional position and personal credibility change how you assess the stated justification for Operation Epic Fury? Or do you believe the White House's counter-argument that the intelligence genuinely showed an imminent Iranian threat? Question B. The Trump administration has offered 4 different justifications for this war in 18 days. Rubio said the imminent threat involved Israel's plan to strike Iran. Trump said Israel had nothing to do with his decision. Johnson said he saw the classified briefings and the threat was real. Kent said the threat was manufactured. One of these accounts has to be wrong. Which one do you think it is, and why? And question C, Tulsi Gabbard entered this administration as one of its most prominent anti-war voices. She has said nothing publicly about this war for 18 days. Her testimony before the House Intelligence Committee was postponed hours after her subordinate resigned, calling the war a lie. What do you think Gabbard is going to say when she finally testifies on Thursday? Drop your answers in the comments. Every response gets read. Evidence first, analysis second.